week of the summer VBS/music camp. And our children preschool through first grade got an opportunity to sing the Word of God this past week. And next week, our first through eighth graders will begin their week of VBS music camp. And part of the music camp portion is a little organ building kit. And so between the 2 weeks, I thought it would be a good opportunity to share this with you guys as well. And if you haven't read the newsletter article, I've been getting lots of questions. How did you get this? Well, I went to a website. Well, first I saw a friend that posted pictures of their kids in Michigan building one of these. I was like, where do I get one of those? So I found the Orgo Kids website and found out it's really hard to get them without paying a lot of money. So they have a map, and it has all the locations around the U.S. where they have people that have purchased one that may be available to borrow. And the AGO, which is the American Guild of Organists in Iowa, Des Moines, had one available. So I reached out to their host, and they said, we'd love for you to borrow it. We've only had one person use it so far, and they purchased it right before COVID hit. So they were happy to let us borrow it for a month. And so I shared it with my son's preschool over Pacific Hills, and then we brought it over to the music camp for the little kids this past week. So all those photos you saw as you were getting your food were pictures of them yet on Friday putting the pipes in and getting to experience the little organ. And then next week, the older kids, I'm gonna tear the whole thing apart and throw it around the room and tell them to fix it and put it back together. So they're gonna have a lot of fun with that. So this is the kit, what it looks like before anything is put together. I don't know how many pieces it is, but it's a lot. So let's go to the next page. The whole thing is like 100 pounds, fully put together. So the first thing I did was I had to put together the frame. There's no screws or nails. Everything is held together by these little wooden tusks, tusk tenon joints. So it makes it really easy for assembly. You just need your hands. All right, go to the next one. So then the next thing I had to do was put together the keyboard. I'm actually gonna take it apart a little bit so I can show you. Each one of these keys is made of wood. Now, on an organ in a sanctuary, there can be different materials that the keys are made out of. Some of them are made of wood, some of them are made of plastic. If you get old enough, they're made of ivory. We can't use that anymore. But these are all solid wood, which is kind of the standard. Plastic is lower, ivory is higher. So wood is good. So I had to put each of these in the right order and put them in the pins here. And let's go ahead to the next slide here. And then the next step was to put the pallet box or wind chest. So that's this piece right here. I had to put that on top. So that is hanging out right here. If I turn it around, you can see a little bit better what's going on here. So this is what holds the air that will eventually go into the pipes. And on top of that, there's these sliders, which I'm not going to pull out because I'd have to pull the whole instrument apart to get to them. But basically, there's these little holes that open and close to let the air in and out. And then back in this corner is the toe board. That's this big wooden piece that the pipes directly connect to. So let's go to the next slide here. So the trackers. Now this is the most tedious part of the entire process. We've got these little leather pieces that connect the keys to the wind chest. And not all trackers are going to be the same. So in a larger organ, you're not necessarily going to use leather. You may be using string or a combination of wire and pulleys. Because basically what happens is every single one of these keys has a direct mechanical connection to the wind chest to open and close things. This is what we call a tracker organ. Now there's two kinds of organs. There's electropneumatic and there's tracker. The instrument we have in the sanctuary is electropneumatic because there's no direct connection from the keys to the pipes. And what we have instead is a series of magnets that, using electricity and wiring and computers, tells each one to open and close. So this is the old school way. We've got the more modern way. Unfortunately, modern is not necessarily always best because wiring can be faulty. And occasionally things go wrong. And so, I'm going to put this back on here so we can get the keys back in their spots. I might need somebody to help me with this because I did this out of order. You're not supposed to remove this piece while the trackers are all engaged. So we've got to get all of these down at the same time. And that one too. And then I put this on. Yeah. Oh, I had it backwards. That's not going to help. There we go. Okay, got it back. So this is why you do things in order instead of out of order. Because if you do it out of order, something could go wrong. And we lost our tracker here. So this is the part where kids actually are better at this than I am because their fingers are so much smaller, they can reach in and get those tracker pieces easier. Okay, so connect the keys to the wind chest. Check. Now, let's see what the next thing is. So the sliders. So that's these little wood pieces that open and close. On a larger instrument, we call those I'm blanking on the word. The stops. So the little tabs on the console that tell you what you're playing. This instrument has only 2 stops. We've got a Gedeck 4-foot, which is this one here, and then a 2-foot flute, which is the one in front. Now they look like they're the same length, but I'll explain to you in a second why there's a 4-foot versus a 2-foot. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so here, just a picture of the sliders. This one's positioned open so the wind can get through. This one's positioned closed. The wind cannot get through on those sliders. Next slide. And then the toe board. So that's this piece on top. Finally, we got that together. So here we've got our keys. The trackers connect to the wind chest. The sliders are hidden inside here. And then the toe board goes on top. Let's go to the next slide. So now the pipes. So I'll start with the 2-foot flute here. Now there's a couple different pieces to the pipe. The one that the kids really learned and it made sense to them was the mouth. And so if you think about it, where would the sound come out of a pipe? If we have a mouth, right? It's going to come out right here. So I showed the kids different ways. I was like, okay, what would happen if I cover this up? Is it going to make a sound? Yep, it makes a sound. What happens if I cover this up? Well, the sound goes away. So that tells us the sound is coming out of the mouth. Now, if I don't have this covered, let's hear what just an open pipe sounds like. So that's our 2-foot. Now, here is our 4-foot. Do you think it's going to be higher or lower? Lower. It's an octave lower. And so the reason is, one of them has been capped. Go ahead and go to the next slide there. One of them has been capped. The 4-foot is capped at the top. The other one is open. And when you cap it, I don't know the fancy physics for all this, but basically it makes it act as if it's twice as long, so it can be twice as low. So here is our 4-foot Gedeck and our 2-foot flutes. And these have been glued shut so that you can't make any adjustments, but they did give us one sample that is adjustable for this Gedeck. And so here, with this piece at the top, you can actually adjust the tuning on it. And so on an instrument that has wooden pipes like this, the organ tuner can fine-tune directly to whatever pitch it needs to be so that the tuning is equal throughout the instrument. Okay, so, one other word, the word rank. So a lot of times if you talk to an organist, they'll talk about the organ, oh, it's got 5 ranks, it's got 50 ranks. That's just telling you how many different sets of pipes that organ has. So this instrument has 2 ranks. We have 1 rank of the 4-foot gedect and 1 rank of the 2-foot flute. Now the instrument we have upstairs in the balcony has 5 ranks of pipes. We have a principal, we have a flute, we have a trumpet, we have a Gims horn, and a Gims horn celeste. So we have a 5-rank organ upstairs. Everything else that you hear me play, it's all digital. So there's only 5 ranks of pipes on the instrument we have here. Let's go ahead to the next one here. Now the next part, so I asked the kids, okay, so we've got it all put together. It's gonna make a sound, right? So let's try and play it. Nothing happens. What do we still need in order to make a sound with the organ? Air, right. And so it's a little bit more complicated than just blowing into a pipe because, well, you need hundreds of people if every single person had to blow a pipe, right? So we have a blower assembly, and we'll start with the feeder bellows. So over here, this is the contraption that will create the air. And back in the day, before they had electricity, you had to have a little choir boy pumping the bellows while the organist played. And I've never read this, but I assume that that's why Bach had so many children. So he had many people to allow him to practice the organ. So the feeder bellows is connected to this hose, and then this hose attaches to what we call the wind trunk. And I told the kids it kind of looks like an elephant trunk. And what the wind trunk does is it takes the air from the reservoir, which is down at the bottom. Actually, since I already have it disconnected, this is the wind reservoir. And it's got a really heavy weight on top, because what's going to happen is the air is pushing up, and then the weight pushes it back down. And so the wind reservoir holds the air, and then the wind trunk will move the air from the wind reservoir up to the wind chest. And from there, you would be able to open and close the sliders to allow the air to go up and down as you press a key. So now that we have all the pieces together, David, if you could be my assistant. So what's going to happen when I feed the air, you'll see that it starts to go up and down. And the trick is to try to keep it like at halfway the entire time. So good. I'll let you do that. And I'm going to start with both of the sliders closed, so nothing is happening. Nothing is happening. Now I've pulled out the 2-foot flute, so you can hear what this sounds like. Pretty high notes here. Now, here is the 4-foot gedect. And so each one by itself is not very powerful, but the great thing about organs is you can pull out as many stops as you want. So that's why when they say pull out all the stops, it's because you're using all the pipes at the same time. So here. Okay, so, and the kids really had fun singing Jesus Loves Me with the organ once we got it all put together. Okay, so let's go to the next slide here. So there's fully assembled, which you can see here, and the next one. There it is, also the other direction. One more. Okay, so just a reminder of what we have in our sanctuary. What you can see on the outside is called the principal, which is the metal rank of pipes that we have on the instrument. So here we have wooden pipes, there we have metal pipes. Which one do you think is making a louder sound, the wood or the metal? The metal, right. And so on Monday, Thursday, we had an issue with the organ, and all the principal pipes were gone. They were not making a sound. So that's why on Monday, Thursday, I switched over to piano for the entire service, because we lost our principal, which the reason it's called principal is because it's the most important stop on the instrument. And so when that's not working, everything else just kind of, it loses its foundation, so to speak. So there's our principal, and these pipes, the tallest one is a stopped 8-foot. And so we have what we call a unified instrument, which means one ring is pretending to be both 8-foot, 4-foot, and 2-foot. So here we have one ring just for 4-foot and one ring just for 2-foot. But on our instrument there, it has to do all three, 8, 4, and 2 at the same time. So what we end up having happen is, as you use more of it to kind of build on itself, you run out of notes where, well, I'm already using it here, so I can't use it there. Anyway, it's not ideal, that's what I'm trying to say. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So here, this morning, I went inside the organ so I could take a picture of what it looks like inside. And so we have 4 rings of pipes that are hidden behind that wall in the balcony. The one in the front here is our trumpet. And then we've got, it's hard to tell from the picture which one is what, but there's the flute, the Gibbs horn, and the Gibbs horn celeste. So the trumpet is what we call a reed. And so just like on a oboe or a clarinet, it has a little piece that vibrates to make the sound. That's why it's kind of got that kind of sound. And it's also much louder as a reed. And then the metal Gibbs horn, which is kind of a hybrid string. So it's fluty, but it's also stringy. So the cool thing about the organ is the organist has the entire orchestra at their fingertips. We've got the string section, we've got the woodwind section, we've got the brass section. Some organs even have percussion, like timpani sounds. Ours doesn't do that, but you've got the whole orchestra kind of at your fingertips. So let's go to the next slide. So then the other thing I took a picture of, it's really hard to see because the lighting is off, but that is the swell shade. So all of the pipes that are inside of this enclosed space is what we call the swell. And so on an organ, you have multiple keyboards. And so the one keyboard is all of the sounds inside the swell. Another keyboard is all the sounds on the grate, which is like the principal that you saw. So typically, there's exposed pipes that are all on one, and then there's enclosed pipes that are all on another. And sometimes you can get a third manual for another enclosed or open space. And so these open and close, there's a pedal with my foot that I will push to open and close these shades. Unfortunately, with this instrument, it doesn't make any difference if it's open or closed. It doesn't actually make the sound softer or louder. It doesn't work. Anyway, so let's keep going. Now let's try to get a picture of what happens underneath it. So just like we have on this instrument, there's pipes at the top, and then you have a toe board. So this is the toe board where all of the pipes, they have individually, specifically drilled holes that are exactly the right size for that pipe. And then under there, we have the wind chest. And then here is our wind reservoir. And then behind here, which you can't see, is where our blower is. And so obviously we don't have choir boys pumping the organ. We have an electric blower that pumps the air in. And depending on the size of the organ, you need a larger or smaller blower. And so we have a half amp blower that is sufficient for 5 rings of pipes. With the larger instrument, you have to have a larger blower. The one at Countryside where we received pipes from, it was like as tall as I am. It's a massive thing. And you have to find a room to hide it in so that nobody sees it. All right, so let's go to the next slide. I think I've got, oh, and I forgot to bring this down. This is not actually connected to our organ, but it came out of the Countryside instrument. It's called the Zimbelstern. And on occasion, when I have people up on the balcony and we have a Trinitarian verse, I like to have them spin the wheel there to play the bells for Trinitarian stanzas, which it's just an auditory cue that we're going to stand up in reverence for the Trinity. And the kids love to get to do that. So typically there's an electric connection and a toe stud, so the organist just presses a button with his foot and on it goes. But for now, it's a manual operation only. Let's go to the next slide. I think I have one more. Okay, so just a review from a couple years ago when we acquired the pipes from Countryside. This is the contents of, I believe, the grate and maybe part of the swell. This is like maybe a third of all the pipes that we were able to acquire. Kind of laid out, there was other pipes that were in other rooms. And so go to the next slide. Now they're all in storage awaiting the final installation at some point in the future. So right now we have a 5-ring instrument. There are approximately 28 rings in storage right there. So it's a considerable amount more of pipes than what we currently have. So before we do the singing with the organ, does anybody have any questions? Yes.
Maybe you should reinforce that having all of those pipes doesn't necessarily mean the organ's going to be 20 times louder.
Yes, so that's a good point. So a lot of our instrument right now is speakers. So we have speakers that are producing sound instead of pipes. And so, digital sound is never as good as authentic sound. Speaker sound versus a live produced sound. So the more that we can have live produced sound, the more natural and the more, I don't know what the word I'm looking for is, warm. The warmer the sound, the more inviting and encouraging to the congregation to sing. And so yes, by adding more pipes does not mean we're going to make it 20 times louder or whatever the number is. The other great thing is when an instrument is installed, the builder has an ability to voice it specifically to the room. And so they are able to increase or decrease the loudness of each individual pipe by just manipulating parts of the metal. And so when it's installed to work in the space. And that's why every organ is unique. You can't take one organ and put it into another room and expect it to do the same thing, because when a builder puts it in, the room is calculated into the process. So I don't know if I have any more pictures. Let's see. I think that's the last one. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
You should tell about what your feet do, and also the special shoes that you have.
Oh yes, I should have brought my shoes down. So when I demonstrated to the kids, before I could play, I had to switch my shoes, because you can't use normal shoes on an organ because the rubber sole it sticks to the keys on the pedal board, and so you need to have a leather sole, kind of like a dance shoe, and it also has about a 1.5 to 2 inch heel on the back. Because I use both my toes and my heels as I'm playing the notes with my feet. And the heel helps just grab those notes. So I always switch my shoes, which is why I've learned it's best to do slip-ons, because it takes less time to get from one to the other. So yeah, there's special shoes, and there's an entire keyboard, just like your hands have. Every single note is also available down at your feet. So you can play melodies or harmonies or bass, whatever you need to with your feet. So sometimes when you hear a really low melody coming through, my hands are busy just doing fluff, and all of the melody is actually down in my feet. So any other questions before we sing our hymn? Okay, well, one more thing I guess I should mention. So we kind of were touching on it with the organ builder will build for the space. The other thing that's important to understand is the room that the organ is put into is the most important stop on the instrument. So the way that the sound sounds once it is produced makes a difference. So if you're in a live space, which echoes, kind of like this right here, it's gonna sound different than if you're in a deader space, like over here, where you have a shorter ceiling that's absorbing sound. And so the acoustics of the room are the most important part of any instrument. And so making sure that you have resonant space will help the organ speak into the room in the most efficiently. And it's also the most beneficial for the members of the congregation as they sing with the instrument, because they're not fighting with things taking away the sound. It's engulfing you and encouraging you in your prayer and praise to the Lord. So we're currently with our organ committee looking at the acoustics in our sanctuary and developing proposals for what could be changed to help the instrument to speak more encouragingly into the room. So let's go ahead and open your hymnals now to our hymn, A Mighty Fortress. This is 656. I'll just do a little intro before we start. Yeah, one at a time usually. So 656, we'll do all 4 verses. Thank you, everyone.